It was just another ordinary morning in a small, quiet town. The kind of place where everyone knew each other, where kids felt safe riding their bikes down the street, and neighbors still borrowed sugar from one another. The school buses, bright yellow and always on time, moved along their usual routes, picking up students with sleepy faces and backpacks slung over their shoulders. To anyone watching, it looked like any other peaceful day. But within a matter of minutes, that calm would shatter in the most unexpected way. It all started with Mia, a bright, soft-spoken 12-year-old who rarely drew attention to herself. She wasn't the loudest in her class, nor the most popular, but she had a heart as big as the world and a sharp sense of observation that often went unnoticed. Mia loved routines, and her bus ride to school was part of her daily rhythm. She always sat in the third row on the right, just behind Mr. Carter, the bus driver, a kind older man who had been driving that route for years. That morning, as Mia climbed aboard, there was nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seemed. The kids laughed and chatted as usual, filling the bus with a chorus of young voices. Mr. Carter gave Mia his usual friendly nod as she passed, but Mia hesitated. Something about her demeanor was different. Her usual shy smile was replaced with a serious, almost urgent expression. Mia leaned in closer to Mr. Carter, barely meeting his eyes, and whispered 3 words that stopped him cold. 3 simple words. His face froze for a split second before he quickly masked it with a calm demeanor, but inside his heart raced. Without saying a word to the other children, Mr. Carter subtly reached for his phone and made a call that would set off a chain of events no one could have anticipated. Minutes later, just as the bus was pulling into the school parking lot, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars swarmed the area, and officers quickly directed students to safety. Teachers rushed out of the building, trying to maintain order as worried whispers spread like wildfire among the kids. "What's going on? Why are the cops here? Is something wrong?" Then, the unthinkable happened. FBI agents arrived on the scene, their presence sending shockwaves through the usually uneventful town. The school went into immediate lockdown, doors bolted and windows secured. Parents began receiving alarming text messages and phone calls, their hearts pounding with fear. What could a 12-year-old girl have possibly said to cause such a massive response? What did Mia know? And why did it seem like Mr. Carter had been waiting for something like this? The answers were coming, but not yet. For now, all anyone could do was wait, caught in the web of suspense that Mia's whispered words had spun. The school had never seen anything like this before. Rows of black SUVs and flashing lights lined the parking lot, and uniformed officers stood at every corner of the building. Inside, the air felt heavy with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Teachers whispered nervously to each other in the hallways while students huddled together in their classrooms, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. Mia sat quietly in the corner of the music room, where her class had been told to wait. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, and her fingers played nervously with the hem of her sweater. She avoided eye contact with anyone, even her best friend Lily, who kept glancing at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Lily leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mia, do you know what's going on? Why are the police here? Did something happen on the bus?" Mia shook her head quickly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't talk about it," she muttered, her voice trembling just enough for Lily to notice. "But you do know something, don't you?" Lily asked, her eyes widening. "Is it bad? Are we in danger?" Mia didn't respond. Instead, she stared down at the floor, her heart pounding in her chest. She wished she could explain it all to Lily, but the truth was, she wasn't even sure how to put it into words. What she'd seen that morning, what had made her lean forward and whisper those 3 words to Mr. Carter, was something she couldn't unsee, no matter how hard she tried. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter was being questioned in one of the administrative offices. He sat stiffly in a chair, his weathered hands gripping the arms tightly as 2 FBI agents stood over him, their expressions unreadable. "So, Mr. Carter," one of the agents began, his voice calm but firm, "let's go over this again. What exactly did the girls say to you?" Mr. Carter hesitated, his eyes darting toward the door as if he expected someone to burst in at any moment. "She just said 3 words," he replied, his voice low. I thought maybe she was mistaken. But the look in her eyes," he paused, shaking his head. "I knew I couldn't ignore it. The second agent leaned in slightly, narrowing his eyes. And what did she say, exactly? Mr. Carter glanced at the floor, his jaw tightening. He knew the words would sound strange out of context, but there was no denying their weight. She said, "He's on board." The agents exchanged a quick, sharp look before one of them scribbled something in his notebook. And did she give any indication of who he might be? No, Mr. Carter replied. She just said it and looked terrified, like she'd seen a ghost. I've been driving that bus for years, and I've seen every kind of kid you can imagine. But this was different. Back in the music room, the tension was almost unbearable. The principal's voice crackled over the intercom, assuring everyone that the situation was under control and that there was no immediate danger. But the students weren't convinced. Whispers filled the room, each rumor more outlandish than the last. "I heard there's a bomb in the school," one boy said, his voice barely above a murmur. "No way," another girl countered. "My brother said it's some kind of fugitive on the loose. Like a criminal or something." Lily glanced back at Mia, her expression growing more concerned by the second. Mia's silence was louder than any of the rumors swirling around them. At that moment, the door to the music room creaked open, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. His presence was commanding, and the room fell silent almost instantly. He scanned the students briefly before his eyes landed on Mia. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. Mia's head shot up, her face pale. "Why, yes. Would you come with me, please?" The room erupted in a chorus of gasps and whispers, but Mia didn't hear any of it. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood up, and her heart hammered against her ribs. Lily grabbed her hand at the last second, her grip tight and desperate. "Mia, what's going on? Why do they want you?" "I don't know," Mia lied, her voice barely audible. She followed the man out into the hallway, where two more agents were waiting. They didn't say a word as they escorted her to a small conference room at the far end of the building. The blinds were drawn, and the only light came from the flickering overhead bulbs. "Please have a seat," one of the agents said, gesturing to a chair in the center of the room. Mia sat down, her hands trembling in her lap. She felt small and exposed under their scrutinizing gazes. "Do you know why you're here, Mia?" the agent asked, his tone gentle but probing. Mia shook her head, though she wasn't sure if it was entirely true. She had an idea, a terrible, sinking feeling in her gut, but she didn't dare say it out loud. "We're here to help," the agent continued. "But we need you to tell us everything you know. Every detail, no matter how small." Mia swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I didn't mean to cause so much trouble," she stammered. I saw something, and I didn't know what else to do." "What did you see?" the agent pressed, leaning forward slightly. Mia hesitated, her mind racing. She thought back to that moment on the bus, the split second when everything changed. She had been staring out the window, lost in her thoughts, when she noticed a man sitting in the back of the bus. He wasn't someone she recognized, and that alone was unusual. In their small town, everyone knew everyone. But it wasn't just that he was unfamiliar. There was something off about him, something that made her stomach churn. He was dressed too neatly, his posture too rigid, his eyes constantly scanning the bus like he was looking for something, or someone. And then she saw it, the edge of a badge peeking out from under his jacket. At first, she thought he might be a cop or a security guard, but when he shifted slightly, she caught a glimpse of something else. A gun. That's when the pieces started clicking into place. The man wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't just some random passenger catching a ride. He was there for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it wasn't good. Mia took a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was a man on the bus," she said, her words trembling. "He looked wrong, like he didn't belong." The agents exchanged another glance, their expressions unreadable. "And you're sure you've never seen this man before?" Mia nodded quickly. "I'm sure. He wasn't from here." One of the agents leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "You did the right thing by speaking up, Mia. But we're going to need more details. Can you describe him? Anything you remember might be helpful." Mia closed her eyes, trying to summon the image of the man in her mind. She described his sharp features, his clean-cut appearance, the way his hands never stopped fidgeting. As she spoke, the agents took notes, their expressions growing more serious with every word. Finally, one of them looked up, his tone grim. Thank you, Mia. You've been very brave. But there's something you need to know. Mia's stomach dropped. What? The agent hesitated for a moment before answering. The man you described, we've been looking for him for a long time. And if he was on that bus, it means something very serious is about to happen. Mia felt her heart stop. Whatever she had stumbled upon, it was far bigger and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Mia felt like the walls of the small room were closing in on her. The agent's words echoed in her head, each one heavier than the last. She had thought she was just trying to be cautious, to do the right thing, but now she was part of something she didn't fully understand. Something dangerous. Why were you looking for him? She asked, her voice barely audible. The agent exchanged another glance with his partner before leaning forward. Mia, that's classified. But what I can tell you is that this man isn't just a random stranger. He's been linked to some very serious activities, and we believe he might have been planning something today. Something involving your school. The words sent a chill down Mia's spine. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What kind of activities? She whispered, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The agent sighed, his expression softening just slightly. You've already helped us a lot by telling us what you saw. For now, that's all you need to focus on, okay? We'll take it from here. But Mia couldn't just leave it at that. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite put together. Who was this man? Why had he been on her bus? And, more importantly, what had he been planning? Meanwhile, outside the room, the school remained in lockdown. Parents had begun gathering near the police barriers, their faces etched with worry. Phones buzzed nonstop with texts and calls as they tried to piece together what was happening. In one of the classrooms, Mr. Carter sat with a group of younger kids, doing his best to keep them calm. But inside, he was anything but. He couldn't stop thinking about Mia's words, and the way she had looked at him with such urgency. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. He had tried to piece it together himself during his interview with the agents. The man she described didn't sound familiar to him, but he knew his bus route like the back of his hand. There wasn't a single stop where an unfamiliar face wouldn't stand out, especially someone who clearly didn't belong in their small town. The agents had asked him if he'd noticed anything unusual before picking up Mia, but the truth was, everything had seemed normal until that moment. He replayed the morning in his mind, searching for details he might have missed. A parked car? Someone loitering near a stop. As the minutes ticked by, the tension inside the school only grew. Lily, still in the music room with her classmates, couldn't shake the feeling that Mia was at the center of whatever was happening. She replayed their last conversation in her mind, trying to make sense of Mia's strange behavior. Mia saw something, she whispered to one of her friends. What do you mean? I don't know, Lily admitted, glancing at the door as if expecting Mia to walk back in at any moment. But I think it was on the bus. Maybe it was someone on the bus. Her friend frowned, the pieces not quite fitting. But why would the FBI show up for that? It doesn't make sense. Lily didn't have an answer. She just knew that Mia wasn't the type to make things up. If she had told the bus driver something important, it must have been serious. Back in the conference room, Mia's mind was spinning. The agents had stopped asking questions, instead stepping out to make a call. She could hear their muffled voices through the door, though she couldn't make out the words. Her stomach twisted with guilt and fear. Had she made a mistake by saying something? What if she had misunderstood? But deep down, she knew she hadn't. She couldn't forget the way the man had scanned the bus, his sharp eyes seeming to take in every detail. She couldn't forget the way her heart had dropped when she saw the edge of the badge and the faint glint of the gun. Suddenly, the door opened, and one of the agents stepped back inside. His expression was more serious than before, his movements brisk. Mia, he said, we're going to need your help with something. Mia blinked, startled. My help? What do you mean? We need you to try and identify the man you saw, the agent explained. We have some photos we'd like you to look at. Mia's stomach tightened. The thought of seeing his face again, even in a photograph, made her feel uneasy. But she nodded, knowing she didn't have much of a choice. The agent placed a tablet on the table in front of her and began swiping through a series of images. Each one was a mugshot or a surveillance photo, the faces of men who all looked vaguely similar. Take your time, the agent said, his voice calm but firm. If you recognize anyone, let us know. Mia leaned forward, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the images. At first, none of the faces looked familiar, and she felt a small flicker of relief. But then, as she swiped to the next photo, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. She was sure of it. The sharp jawline, the piercing eyes, the way he held himself, it was all there. "That's him," she whispered, her voice shaking. The agent leaned over to look at the photo, his expression darkening. "Are you certain?" Mia nodded, her heart pounding. "I'm sure. That's the man I saw on the bus." The agent quickly stepped out of the room, leaving Mia alone once again. She could hear him talking in urgent tones to someone on the other end of the line. As she sat there, her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? And what was he planning to do? Outside, the agents were mobilizing. The identification Mia had provided seemed to confirm their worst fears. The man on the bus wasn't just anyone, he was someone dangerous, someone they had been tracking for months. But what was he doing here, in a small town where nothing ever happened? And why had he targeted the school? The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they painted was far from clear. The agents knew they had to act fast, before it was too late. The tension inside the school was reaching a breaking point. Hours had passed, though to everyone trapped inside, it felt like days. The muffled sounds of police radios and hurried footsteps outside the classrooms only added to the growing sense of unease. Whispers rippled through the students like waves, each one more frantic than the last. Everyone knew something big was happening, but no one knew exactly what. Mia sat frozen in the small conference room, staring at the now dark screen of the tablet in front of her. The weight of her identification hung heavy on her chest. She had done what they asked, pointed out the man she'd seen on the bus, but instead of relief, all she felt was dread. What if he knew she had noticed him? What if he was still nearby? The thought made her skin crawl. The door opened abruptly and Mia jumped. One of the agents entered, his expression stern but not unkind. "Mia, we need to ask you one more thing," he said. Mia's voice came out shakier than she intended. "What is it?" "The man you identified, we think he might have been carrying something. Did you notice anything in his hands? A bag? A package?" Mia's mind raced back to the moment on the bus. She tried to remember every detail, every movement. Then it hit her. She had seen him set something down on the floor next to his seat. It was a black duffel bag, unzipped just enough for her to see that it was full of something. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. But now the memory sent a chill through her. "He had a bag," she said quietly, her eyes wide. "A black duffel bag. I didn't see what was inside, but it looked full." The agent's expression hardened. He nodded once, and left the room without another word. Outside, the agents sprang into action. The description of the bag had confirmed their fears. It wasn't just the man they were worried about. It was what he might have left behind. The school's principal, who had been working closely with law enforcement, was briefed on the situation. "We need to evacuate the students," one of the agents said firmly. The principal's face paled. But you said we were safe inside," he stammered. "That was before we had all the information," the agent replied. "Now we can't take any chances. We need to clear the building immediately, but it has to be done quietly. If the suspect is still in the area, we don't want to alert him." The plan was set in motion. Teachers were instructed to lead their classes out through specific exits, one at a time, under the guise of a routine drill. The students were told to leave their belongings behind and stay calm. In the music room, Lily felt her stomach drop when the teacher announced that they were evacuating. Something about the way the adults were moving, their hushed tones and stiff postures, made it clear this wasn't just a drill. "Where's Mia?" Lily whispered to one of her friends as they lined up. "She's still with the FBI," the friend replied. Lily's mind raced. If Mia was with the FBI, that meant she was at the center of whatever was happening. Lily wanted to find her, to ask her what was going on, but the teachers were ushering them out too quickly. As the students filed out of the building, the agents were working tirelessly to secure the area. Bomb squads had been called in, and the parking lot was being searched for any suspicious vehicles. The black duffel bag Mia had described was now their top priority. Inside the bus depot, a team of officers was meticulously inspecting every vehicle. They started with Mia's bus, checking every seat, every compartment. And then near the back, they found it. The bag was exactly as Mia had described. Black, slightly worn, and heavy. The lead officer gestured for the others to step back as the bomb squad moved in. The minutes that followed were agonizingly slow, each second feeling like an eternity. Meanwhile, Mia had been moved to a secure location inside the school. She sat in silence, her heart pounding as she thought about the bag. What if she had been wrong? What if it was just a gym bag or someone's forgotten luggage? But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. The agents returned, their expressions grim but focused. One of them knelt down to meet Mia's gaze. "You've been very brave, Mia. Thanks to you, we found the bag. We're handling it now." Mia's eyes widened. What was in it? The agent hesitated. "We don't know yet, but the bomb squad is working on it. The important thing is that you spoke up. You might have saved a lot of lives today." Mia didn't know how to feel. Relief, fear, guilt. All she could think about was the man on the bus, his piercing eyes, and the way he seemed so calm, so deliberate. Where was he now? Was he watching all of this unfold? As the students gathered outside in the cold January air, parents began arriving at the scene, their faces etched with panic and worry. Lily spotted her mom near the edge of the crowd and ran toward her, but her thoughts were still with Mia. Back at the bus depot, the bomb squad carefully opened the bag. Inside, they found wires, batteries, and what appeared to be a timer. It was a crude device, but it was enough to confirm their worst fears. The lead agent stepped outside to inform his team. "We've got an active device," he said grimly. "Deactivate it and secure the area. We need to find this guy before he tries something else." The news spread quickly through the chain of command. The man Mia had identified wasn't just a random stranger. He was a suspect in a series of similar incidents across the state. Each time, he had slipped through their fingers, leaving chaos in his wake. As the day dragged on, the tension only grew. The school grounds were swarming with law enforcement, and helicopters hovered overhead. For everyone involved, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. And somewhere, just out of sight, the man who had started it all was watching. The air outside the school felt heavy despite the chill, the kind of weight that settled in the pit of your stomach and refused to let go. Parents were trying to shield their children from the chaos, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Mia sat in the back seat of an unmarked car, watching the scene unfold. The flashing lights, the murmurs of the crowd, the sharp commands from agents. It all felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She had thought the worst was over when they found the bag, but the uneasy expressions on the agents' faces told her otherwise. They were still looking for the man. Somewhere he was out there, and the knowledge kept gnawing at her. Every shadow, every unfamiliar face in the crowd, felt like it could be him. Inside the command center set up near the school, the lead agent, Daniels, was reviewing the latest intel. The device in the duffel bag had been neutralized, but the timing didn't add up. If the suspect had left the bag on the bus, why hadn't it gone off hours ago? The device was crude but functional. It should have activated while the bus was still on its route. Something wasn't right. And then the second twist came. One of the tech analysts burst into the room, her face pale. "Agent Daniels, we've got a hit," she said breathlessly. Daniels turned sharply. "What is it?" "The man Mia identified. He's been spotted on surveillance footage." The room went silent. "Where?" Daniels asked, his voice low and urgent. The analyst hesitated, then pointed to the screen. "Here, near the school. Less than 10 minutes ago." Daniel's stomach dropped. The suspect wasn't running away, he was circling back. Outside, the atmosphere shifted as the new intel filtered through the ranks. The lockdown perimeter tightened, and agents began scanning the crowd more intently. Parents were being moved further from the school, their confusion turning into outright panic as the gravity of the situation became clear. Mia noticed the sudden change, the way everyone seemed to be moving faster, speaking in hushed tones that barely concealed their urgency. She leaned forward in the car, her hands gripping the edge of the seat. "What's happening?" she asked the agent sitting in the front. The agent didn't turn around. "Just stay calm, Mia. We're handling it." But Mia couldn't stay calm. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Meanwhile, Lily was still huddled with her classmates near the evacuation zone. She spotted her mom in the distance, waving for her to come closer, but the teachers were holding everyone back. The fear in the adults' eyes was impossible to ignore now. Lily glanced around, searching for any sign of Mia. She felt like there was something she was missing, some crucial piece of the puzzle. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. At first, it didn't register. He was just another face in the crowd, blending in with the chaos. But then Lily noticed the way he moved, calm, deliberate, almost too composed for the situation. And when their eyes briefly met, she felt a jolt of recognition. It was the man Mia had described. Lily's heart started pounding. She looked around, trying to catch the attention of one of the agents, but they were all focused elsewhere. She didn't know what to do. Should she yell? Run? What if she was wrong? But then she saw it. The black jacket he was wearing. The same one Mia had mentioned, with the faint tear along the sleeve. She was certain now. The man disappeared into the crowd, moving toward the edge of the school grounds. Lily hesitated for only a moment before making a decision. She ducked away from her group and began following him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. The man's movements were purposeful, but he didn't seem to notice Lily trailing behind him. He stopped near an electrical box at the back of the school, glancing around before pulling something out of his pocket. Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was a second device. Back in the command center, Daniel's radio crackled to life. "We've got an agent reporting suspicious activity near the west perimeter," a voice said. "Possible visual on the suspect." Daniels grabbed his radio. "All units converge on the west perimeter. Secure the area immediately." The agents moved quickly, but Lily was already there, hiding behind a tree as she watched the man. He was crouched by the electrical box, attaching the device to it. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it couldn't be good. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, and she pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a message from her mom, asking where she was. Lily's fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't have time to reply. The man stood up, his work apparently done, and began walking away. Lily ducked further behind the tree, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. And then, just as he was about to disappear from view, an agent stepped into his path, gun drawn. "Stop right there," the agent commanded. The man froze, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he might comply. But then, in a flash, he turned and bolted. The chase was on. The agent pursued the man across the school grounds, their footsteps echoing against the pavement. The suspect darted through the narrow alley between the gym and the science building, his movements swift and desperate. Nearby, other agents fanned out, closing in on the area, but he was fast, weaving through obstacles with a precision that hinted at careful planning. Mia, still seated in the car, could see the commotion from where she sat. Her heart raced as she watched the agents sprinting in the distance, the tension in the air so thick she could barely breathe. She didn't need anyone to tell her what was happening. She knew they had found him. Meanwhile, Lily was still near the electrical box, staring at the device the man had left behind. Her mind was racing. It didn't look like a bomb, not exactly. It had wires, sure, but there was something strange about it, something she couldn't quite put into words. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and snapped a photo of it, sending it to her mom with a frantic message. "Tell them about this. It's important." Agents were converging on the area now, their shouts growing louder. Lily backed away from the box, her hands trembling as she tried to process what she'd just witnessed. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone else. It was Mia. She had climbed out of the car and was moving cautiously toward the scene, her face pale but determined. Lily felt a surge of relief. If anyone could help make sense of this, it was Mia. As the suspect rounded the corner of the gym, he found himself face to face with a line of agents blocking his path. He skidded to a halt, his chest heaving as he looked for another escape route. But before he could make a move, Agent Daniels stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. "It's over," Daniels said, his gun trained on the man. "Put your hands where I can see them." For a moment, it seemed like the man might surrender. His shoulders slumped, and he raised his hands slowly. But then, in one quick motion, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a small remote with a blinking red light. The agents reacted instantly, shouting at him to stop, but it was too late. He pressed the button, and everyone braced for the explosion. But nothing happened. The silence that followed was deafening. The man stared at the remote in confusion, pressing the button again and again, but the device remained inert. Daniels seized the opportunity, lunging forward and tackling the man to the ground. The other agents quickly moved in, securing his hands behind his back and confiscating the remote. As the man was dragged to his feet, his expression shifted from confusion to rage. "You think you've won," he spat. "You don't even know what's coming." Daniels didn't respond, but his jaw tightened as he turned to the agents near the electrical box. "Get that device out of here," he ordered. Lily watched from a safe distance as the bomb squad carefully removed the device. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. Something about the suspect's words lingered in her mind, a nagging feeling that this wasn't over yet. And then Mia spoke up. "It's a decoy," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Everyone turned to look at her. "The bag on the bus, the device by the electrical box, they were meant to distract us," Mia continued. "He wanted everyone focused on those while he did something else." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying, Mia?" Mia hesitated, piecing it together in her head. "He didn't come back for the school," she said slowly. "He came back for the people. All of us, gathered in one place." Daniel's expression darkened as the realization hit him. He grabbed his radio, barking orders to his team. "Search the crowd. Look for anything suspicious. Bags, packages, anything out of place. And lock down the area now." The agents sprang into action, combing through the evacuation zone with renewed urgency. Parents and students were ushered further back, their confusion turning into outright fear. And then, near the edge of the crowd, an officer spotted it, a small, inconspicuous backpack left behind on the ground. The area was cleared within seconds, and the bomb squad moved in. This time, there was no doubt about what they were dealing with. The device inside was far more sophisticated than the others, its timer already ticking down. Mia and Lily watched from a safe distance, their hearts pounding as the bomb squad worked to defuse it. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension so thick it was almost unbearable. Finally, with just seconds to spare, the lead technician gave a thumbs up. "Device neutralized," he called out. The crowd erupted into relieved cheers and sobs, parents hugging their children tightly as the weight of the day's events finally began to lift. But even as the suspect was loaded into a police car and the scene was secured, one question lingered in Mia's mind. If this had all been a distraction, what was the real plan? And then, as she turned to look at Lily, she saw it. The same question reflected in her best friend's eyes. As the crowd began to disperse and the chaos settled into a tense calm, Mia and Lily stayed rooted in place, watching the flurry of activity around them. The suspect had been taken away, the school grounds were finally clear, and the immediate danger seemed to have passed. But neither of them felt any real sense of relief. The questions still swirling in their minds made it impossible to fully exhale. Agent Daniels approached them, his face lined with exhaustion but filled with determination. He crouched slightly to meet Mia's eyes, his tone softer now. "Mia, you did something extraordinary today," he said. "Because of you, we were able to stop something terrible. You should be proud of yourself." Mia didn't feel proud. She felt drained, like every ounce of her energy had been used up in the whirlwind of the day. "But what about what he said?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said we didn't know what was coming. What if there's more?" Daniels hesitated, glancing at Lily before answering. "We're going to investigate every angle. I promise you, we'll figure out what he meant. But right now you both need to be with your families. You've been through enough." Lily nodded, but Mia wasn't convinced. There was something about the way the man had spoken, something in his tone that felt unfinished, like he wasn't just bluffing. She didn't say it out loud, but the unease in her chest wouldn't go away. Later that evening, Mia sat with her parents in their living room, the TV flickering softly in the background. News stations were already covering the story, showing footage of the evacuation and the tense moments that had unfolded throughout the day. Her parents kept hugging her, asking if she was okay, but Mia didn't know how to explain what she was feeling. She thought about the bus ride that morning, how normal everything had seemed. She thought about the man's face, the way he had looked so calm until the very end. Most of all, she thought about the way her gut had told her something was wrong, even before anyone else noticed. Lily texted her later that night, "Do you think it's really over?" Mia stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I don't know. But I hope so." The next few days were a blur of questions, debriefings, and endless media coverage. The FBI revealed that the suspect was part of a larger network, though they were still piecing together the full scope of the group's plans. The bag on the bus and the device by the electrical box had been distractions, just as Mia had suspected. But what really chilled her was learning that the final device, the one left near the crowd, had been designed to cause maximum damage. If it hadn't been for the sharp eyes of the agents and the quick actions of the bomb squad, things could have ended very differently. Despite the resolution, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped into a much bigger story, one that wasn't over yet. She spent hours replaying everything in her mind, wondering if she'd missed something, some small detail that could explain what the man had meant by his ominous words. At school, things were different. Students looked at her like she was some kind of hero, though she didn't feel like one. Teachers gave her encouraging smiles, and the principal even called her into his office to personally thank her. But Mia didn't want the attention. She just wanted things to go back to the way they were before, when she could ride the bus to school without looking over her shoulder. Lily was the only one who seemed to understand. They spent their lunch breaks sitting together in the quiet corner of the courtyard, talking about everything and nothing. It was a strange kind of comfort, being with someone who had been there, who had seen the same things and felt the same fear. One afternoon, about a week after the incident, Mia's dad came home with an envelope in his hand. "This came for you," he said, handing it to her with a curious look. Mia opened it cautiously, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the official FBI letterhead. Inside was a short note from Agent Daniels, thanking her again for her bravery and letting her know that the man they'd arrested was cooperating with their investigation. There was one line in the letter that stood out to her. Sometimes, the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. Mia folded the letter and tucked it away in her desk drawer. She didn't know if she believed that yet, but it was a comforting thought. As the weeks turned into months, life slowly began to return to normal. The school repaired the damage from the incident, and the community came together to support one another in the aftermath. But for Mia, something had changed. She found herself paying more attention to the little things, the moments and details that others might overlook. One day, while waiting for the bus after school, she noticed a girl sitting alone on the curb, her face buried in her hands. Without thinking, Mia walked over and sat down beside her. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Yeah," she mumbled. "Just a bad day." Mia nodded, offering a small smile. "I get it. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." The girl didn't say anything, but she gave Mia a grateful look before wiping her eyes and standing up. As the bus pulled up and the doors opened, Mia felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe Agent Daniels was right. Maybe it really was the small actions that mattered most. And as she stepped onto the bus, she realized something else. Even though the world could be scary and unpredictable, there was still room for kindness, for courage, and for hope. And sometimes that was enough.